Hi, my name's Joanne Cosmos Finn, and I'd like to offer you a postcard from GA. So many years ago, my UU friend Valerie from Long Beach, my first church, kept insisting, Joanne, you gotta go to GA. There's nothing like singing Spirit of Life with 1,000 other people. But I never did make it until this year. So last week, in Portland, Oregon, I turned to her and said, Val, there's nothing like singing Building the New Way with 5,000 other people. Singing in the GA choir with 190 voices, well, that was an awesome highlight for me as well. But looking around and seeing so much activism, aliveness, dedication to ideals that I deeply believe in, soaking in new ideas, possibly life-changing. And as a lifelong advocate for people with disabilities, I might have found a little corner of advocacy that I can help with. I attended a workshop called A New Way to Radical Inclusivity. The newly formed Accessibility and Inclusion Ministry, or AIM for short, has developed a new certificate program for congregations who seek to be fully accessible and inclusive. At our church, I think we're already ahead of the curve with our beautiful and accessible sanctuary. But AIM challenges us to consider a culture shift, one that drops us into deep theological sensitivity and radical welcome. So I feel challenged now to aim high, drop deep, and being in community here at our church is an awesome place to do that. Thanks, GA.
I'm Maura Mattingly, and like Joanne, this also was my first GA. I signed up for the choir, and I was a delegate from Mount Diablo and was very honored to be that, so that took up quite a bit of my days. But my favorite session that I attended was on contemplative practices within the UU tradition. It was led by 3 young UU ministers that used a mixture of chant, Taizé chant. They provided daily meditation, walking meditation, and devotional readings as tools for developing your own spiritual practice. They suggested that you root your daily actions in spiritual practice. Carry the sacred into everyday activities. Can everyday tasks take on ritual? Yes, they can. I remember reading that Thomas More practiced mindful dishwashing. He does. Simply invite wisdom in, they suggested, either in a group setting or individual settings. It's an attitude of community first principle. Prayer is simply the connection to your own highest values, but most of all, practice requires practice. Do it each and every day. The tools they provided me, I will explore over the next few months, and I'm very grateful to have gone. I was overwhelmed by the feeling there. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Aki Rasmussen, and this was my 4th GA. Dear MDUUC, we arrived in Portland and are enjoying our 4-day free public transportation passes we received in our packets. GA is huge, alive with anticipation and energy, with over 4,500 people ready to partake of its rich offerings. One of the highlights for me was sharing in the celebration of the announcements of the 2 Supreme Court decisions. With these decisions and so many other UU activities, GA reminds me in a powerful way what we can do when we come together to effect change. Proud to be UU. Wish you were here, Aki.
Hi, I'm Meg Richardson, and I was honored to serve as a delegate from this congregation. We go to General Assembly because of our polity, our governing structure. We don't have a pope or a bishop or a council of elders. The power is in the congregations with the people, and if you don't think that's radical, you haven't read Wikipedia. Wikipedia calls this religious anarchy. Our UU Youth Service Committee celebrated 75 years by awarding the Eleanor Roosevelt Medal to Congressman John Lewis, a man who hopes his legacy is that he just tried to help out. He talked about forgiveness, activism, and equality. He told us, don't wait for someone else to do it. You got to do it. What a radical idea.
I'm Arla Zunger. I was at a General Assembly 19 years ago when the then President John Burns called same-sex couples up to the stage to celebrate, I think, the Supreme Court striking down part of the Defense of Marriage Act. There were a number of people then who came up. But a week ago Friday, when President Peter Morales called married same-sex couples and lesbians and gays now eligible for marriage onto the stage in honor of the Supreme Court decision recognizing same-sex marriage, it was crowded to overflowing. I saw a young clergy couple, hand in hand, literally skipping across the room to go up on the stage. I saw a stooped, white-haired woman who must have been in her 90s, crying tears of joy. Peter Morales placed a beautiful rainbow-colored cloth on the podium and declared, I am convinced this would not have happened without the activism of Unitarian Universalists. Morales gave us permission to be smug until the end of General Assembly. And then he said, go out and continue the work for justice. I was proud for all of us.
I'm Bob Lane. The workshop felt like one of the revivals I went to when I was a boy growing up in the South. Chris, the workshop leader, spoke passionately that our goal was to marshal our spiritual superpowers to rock for justice. His words, though I share the sentiment, and he gave a very compelling example. When Arizona passed its draconian anti-immigrant law, SB 1070, Chris, a committed justice activist, committed to going to Arizona and spending the summer. But as the day got close for him to leave, he began to be afraid. There was a very hostile environment in Arizona against immigrants and their supporters, and it was getting worse. He went to his pastor, Reverend Jacqueline of the Oakland Church, and asked her to pray for him. He thought their private conversation would be the end of it. At the next worship service, she asked Chris to come down to the front. She came down off the dais and laid her hands on him to show her support. And then she invited the congregation to come down as well. One by one, they came forward and they also laid their hands on Chris until the entire congregation held him in the embrace of their support and love. He said that he thought about that moment every single day he was in Arizona, and he was never afraid.
I'm Kate Newkirk, and I very much enjoyed my first GA. I was able to attend sessions on a myriad of different topics, but in Saturday I just call Indigenous Peoples Day because I went to 2 workshops, and then the Commit to Respond witness was very much a Native event. The workshops focused on partnering with them to preserve the Lummi people, Lummi tribe of Washington, to preserve their natural spaces, their natural area, and also to work with them on climate justice. During the public witness that day, the Lummi leaders spoke again about their ongoing fight to protect the natural resources in their area. And the video you saw was the daughter of one of those leaders who's been on the front lines for 35 years. Basically, these people have fished the Salish Sea, which includes the area known as Puget Sound, for thousands of years. In recent years, they've led brigades of traditional canoes out to the base of huge oil rigs. So you can imagine these tiny canoes and the oil rigs, and yet they were still heard. Now the area is threatened with the creation of the largest coal extracting operation in the U.S. This will further threaten the supply of herring and salmon, and the thousands of huge freighters that will enter the area will disrupt the communication of the orcas that pass through that part of the Pacific, as well as just devastating the natural area for short-term gain. And the members of the Lummi tribe reminded us that they did not go to war those many centuries ago. They were not defeated by white settlers. Instead, they entered into treaties with the U.S. And those treaties are being broken again. They said they don't want sympathy from us, but they do want collaboration, and they're getting that with the UUs in that area. In March, the UU College of Social Justice sponsored a week-long journey to meet with the leaders of the Lummi Nation, and they're planning another trip in the spring of next year. Wouldn't it be great if we can send a contingent of people there? We have much to learn in terms of environment and climate justice from Indigenous peoples. One Lummi leader said that they think not in terms of years or even decades, but in terms of generations. And they base their decisions on how it will affect their great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren or 7 generations ahead. What if we all made our decisions based on this long-range view of the world?
I'm Art Unger. I have been to at least 20, many more than that, GAs. Reverend Takahashi was a presenter at 3 workshops on leadership, on justice, and on youth. That is a very broad knowledge of ministry. I attended the one on accountable leadership. The panel's charge was, quote, to show up in the world as strong leaders who are intentional about creating and sustaining multicultural community, unquote. The other panelists were Reverend Dr. Martin Lavanhar, minister of All Souls UU Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Reverend Dr. Robert Hardees, minister of All Souls UU Church in Washington, D.C., and Reverend Abi Janamanchi, minister of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church in Bethesda, Maryland. These are some of our best-known ministers from our largest congregations in the UUA. As Leslie said, she was playing with the big boys. The talks were all outstanding, and Leslie held her own. There are also practical workshops. I attended a presentation of a template for websites that is being developed by the UUA's IT staff. It looks very promising, and we are considering using it for our MDUUC webpage. It might happen by fall. A whole new look for the public face of our church. I also went to one on creating social media for Facebook and Twitter. We need to do a better job of using these tools, which offer a significant way of communicating, especially with young adults. If you are interested in helping, please let me know.
I'm Mary Fenelon, and I was also honored to be a delegate. And I've lost track of how many GAs, but I wouldn't miss it as long as I can manage to get myself there. One of the particularly interesting sessions that I went to was kind of a Shark Tank takeoff. Participants outlined innovative ideas on how to spread the social justice word. And yes, we voted on who should win the $500 grand prize. Picture this, 3,000 candles spelling out "so all can vote" on the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool in Washington, D.C. Or hundreds of people making a Valentine's human heart in a public park supporting gay marriage. They do it every year. It grows every year. Or the No More Deaths campaign. They work in the medical camps in the Arizona desert, providing water to immigrants crossing the border and aiding those who suffer the culture of abuse and shakedown while in the U.S. custody. Then there's the Solidarity Network. it, quote, operates on recipients' issues, not ours. Good point. And on legislation can't change hearts, we must retrain the heartless. This small group ministry advises us to serve the people where they are. Reverend Adam Dyer explained the California Equity Ministry Faithify, which works in partnership with the UU Justice Ministry of California. They develop programs on congregational coalition building and spiritual development. And finally, there was the Chalice Oak Foundation. Who knew that there was an organization to provide consultants and a 501c3 umbrella for social justice startups? Good thing to know. There are endless ways to support social justice causes. We just need to be open to trying whatever works.
Representatives from the Lummi Nation taught us that in their language, this means thanks. So let's take a moment and thank all of our delegates and representatives who are willing to share today. Thank you. Multiple hymnals, lots of words, technological problems, and things running over. You have really experienced General Assembly now. And one thing I want to say that I think you've probably figured out is that General Assembly each year has many stories. There are the ones told under the big lights and the cameras that are scripted and subtitled and videoed before us, and many of those are online and you can go and see them. And there are also the individual stories. There are the people who are reunited after not seeing each other for many years. There are people who meet at General Assembly and later they find out they're going to get married. There are people who have a first experience which puts them on a whole nother trajectory of life every year. And there are also collective parallel universes, which is what our youth community, and in some years our young adult community, and always our community of color experiences at General Assembly each year. At General Assembly for many years, I've had reason to travel between worlds. And perhaps there has been no General Assembly before this one where I was so aware of the spaces between the different perspectives. The Supreme Court decision on marriage equality, the same day that President Barack Obama gifts the nation with his stirring eulogy for the Reverend Clementa Pinckney of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Our meaningful partnership with the Lummi Nation, and I wanted to show a bit of that video because what that shows is the way that woman is walking between her contemporary traditional world and just the world of being a young adult, right? Our meaningful partnership with that nation, which was celebrated, and yet the seriousness of that partnership because it was about meeting the changes in our climate. In the good and joyous celebration of marriage equality were also many, many, many notes sounded by those who would identify themselves as the queer community, some of color, others not, many of whose representatives were clear that marriage equality is a good goal, but it is also predominantly a white and middle class goal and not as relevant as the struggles for non-discrimination in housing and wages and with the criminal justice system for BGLTQ members who are of color, or white members whose experience has not been one of assimilating into the heteronormative marriage as an institution. A colleague put it this way, please be gentle with folks now. And though you might like a heads up, it's probably not a good time, it never is, to tell anyone that their feelings aren't a good strategy, or that they ought to be grateful that enough straight people finally decided we're human, or that we BGLT people should be careful of straight people's feelings, otherwise straight folks might stop supporting our rights. Complexity and sadness mustard seeds all around, also the seeds of hope. I was struck again and again how we are truly, not just us as Unitarian Universalists, but our nation in a time of cultural ferment. But we did reflect on who we were, and for the 5th straight year, we heard reports of the declining numbers of Unitarian Universalists in our churches. And we also continued to hear those seeds of hope about how to tie what we do in our brick and mortar churches to more outreach through virtual ministries, through other kinds of community ministries that take place outside the church context. As financial advisor Larry Ladd observed, less than half of our churches have grown in the last 10 years, although almost 80% of our 41 largest congregations did grow. He concludes this: any mission-based organization should grow, and especially one with a message as compelling as ours. But we are experiencing all these different trends, and they are leading or should lead to intense conversations about the models of religious community that will serve our mission in the years ahead. For the people of my generation, Ladd said, it means doing more shutting up and listening. His words, complexity. It was so good to have the more than 30 MDUUC folks in the mix. We never did get an accurate count because it was like herding cats to even get them in the same place. But it was a spectrum of ages and backgrounds and race and class and abilities. Which reminds me of one of my growing edges, which is that I love to use, I've noticed, the metaphor of walking in my preaching, which is actually, at this point in the struggle for equal access for people who are differently abled, not a comfortable metaphor. So I hereby amend the title of my homily today to Traveling in Complexity. Because ending on a note of revision seems only fitting to pay tribute to the many ways that we are coming together in this time when we must embrace complexity and build a new way. Oh, and by the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Leslie Takahashi.